This next speaker has also been an early supporter of the Sales Confidence event and actually spoke at Level 39 in January. And he's also now CRO of a company called Ometria, which I personally had the good pleasure of working away in the bedroom and setting up some of the sales processes that now he's ripped out a few years on since I joined. So really excited, and a round of applause for Pete Crosby, CRO, Ometria.
Hey everyone. So I was sat next to a moment ago Laurence from Pipedrive. She used to be at LinkedIn, and we discovered together, I didn't know she was at LinkedIn, we discovered together that the two of us spent 4 years being arch rivals working in Paris. She was at LinkedIn, I was at Viadio, LinkedIn kind of won, but we spent 4 years being arch rivals, and it reminded me of my Viadio interview, like the day that I went through the door of Viadio. So I was working in Manchester, and I had to get a flight over to meet the CEO, this legendary guy that I'd never met. And it was supposed to be at Hotel Costas. Now, if you know Paris, Hotel Costas is the coolest hotel in all of Paris. Everyone that works there is a supermodel that's out of work, or it's a bodybuilder that's out of work, so you feel very inferior. It's incredible. It's open till about 6 in the morning. And I was really, really, really late because my flight was delayed. I arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport. I've been there maybe 500 times. I've never in my life seen it so busy. I just couldn't get through because it was my first time. And I arrived just about 1 o'clock in the morning into Hotel Costas for this interview. It's completely packed, and I have a 2.5-hour interview. Finishes at 3:30, and then Dan and I get in a taxi together, and we go back to Charles de Gaulle. I spend 2 hours in the hotel before going back to work, and he flies to China to finalise an acquisition. And just reminded me of quite how important it is to have an incredible founder in the startup that you're in. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But first of all, I want to reposition the title of this talk, because James, being a sales guy, I know we're supposed to be humble, but sometimes we're a little bit full of ourselves. And James has given me this incredible title of how to get from 0 to $10 million. And I'm not quite sure I can speak about that in 20 minutes, or even if I can answer that question. We all know that that first bit, the 0 to the $2 million, 0 to 1.5, that's a very, very different story to the 2 to the 10. So I'm going to speak about the 2 to the 10, but what I realized when I started to think about what am I doing, I've just joined Ometria the last 3 months, so I just began this journey for the 3rd time. So what am I thinking about right now? And the answer is not the kind of stuff that you find when you go to the SaaSGrowth blog, all these other incredibly useful blogs. If you want to know the metrics and the things that you need to funnel and how to build the funnels you need to look at, there's plenty of places you can go to find that stuff. So I'm not going to talk about that because you can sit there and read it on your device while I'm talking. Instead, I want to talk about the process that I've been through a couple of times. And the first thing is around how to choose. How do you choose the right place to go? Because the big news is you cannot do a 2 to 10 million journey in the wrong business. It's just not going to happen. And so the key to that for me is always the founder and the senior team. Like, the biggest mistake that I've seen, in particular VP sales make, is joining a business where there's a big problem and they're the VP sales guy that's going to come in and fix it. It almost never works. If it does work, it's because you got lucky. Okay? You need to choose a business where you believe in the founder and the senior team. Now, they can take on all sorts of aspects. It doesn't mean they must be flamboyant. I've met some incredible founders who are just technically first class, but crucially, they know where they're going, and they know how they're going to get there, and they know what they need to hire. And you need to be that person, rather than the hopeful VP sales who's come in to fix a problem. Choose carefully. And when you're choosing, the second thing to look at is the metrics. Don't go anywhere where they will not show you the KPIs and the metrics in their entirety before you go, because it means they're hiding something. So I remember very clearly when I joined Ometria, I was on my way to Wembley to see Spurs. It was a freezing cold day. You know, the day where they have to paint the lines blue because of the snow and you can't see the lines. And I went with a friend of mine who's a CFO, and I showed him, look, I've emailed this guy at Ometria, and I asked him for all of the metrics because I'm about to make my choice, and within 5 minutes I got a PDF with everything going back over the last 3 years. And I've had a look at it, and I think it was pretty damn good actually. So we looked at it together. He spotted some things that I hadn't spotted. I spotted some things he hadn't spotted, but what we figured out was this story is pretty good. The guys are doing what they say they are going to do. If you can't get that from a founder or a CEO before you join, then it's the wrong business. Do not go there. And the second thing to keep in mind is your network. If you got to the level of VP sales or CRO, you've probably got a pretty good network, because you go to events like this, you know lots of people, you bump into people like Chris Topman at places like this, you've got a good network. And you've got to be really careful when you take the advice, because the advice you'll get from a VC in particular is not always the right advice. Keep in mind that there are a couple of reasons why companies want to hire a VP sales round about the Series A level. And the first reason is because they haven't got the faintest idea what they're doing, and they want someone to come and fix it. But they're never going to tell you that. They will not tell you that. It doesn't mean that business can't be turned around. It doesn't mean that you can't succeed. It doesn't mean that somebody can't fix it. But my advice to you is, if you want to scale fast, 2 to 10, this is not just about you and how brilliant you are because you're just one person. This is about choosing the right environment for you to apply your skills in the right way. Second type of business that a VC will send you to is one where they are just lacking and have always lacked commercial skills. That's fine if that's what you want, but then you want lots of equity and you're going to take a big bet. You need to be at a place in your life where you can take that big bet. But the one that you can be sure is going to scale in the right way if you can do your job well, that business is a business that is flying. And that's why you need to check the metrics. But be very careful when you take advice. Nobody's going to tell you, we'd like you to invest in our basket case business that we don't know what to do with. And when I say basket case, I'm being a little bit unfair. There are loads, by the way, I've never been an entrepreneur, and I realized when I was at Viadio in France how offended I was when people called me entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurs are a thing unto themselves, and I never started anything. I always went in at Series A and helped a business to get itself scaling and get itself working and building. So at Viadio, we made it to IPO. At Triptease, we did the 2 to 10 million journey pretty fast, about 18 months. At Ometria now, we've just begun that process. We're around about $3.5, $4 million ARR at this moment. But when you go into that process, you need to know exactly what you're going into. Don't go in to the wrong business. Second thing to talk about is what happens when you get through the door. Okay? So I remember very clearly when I went to Triptease for the first time, they told me, okay, so now we need to know what is your 90-day plan. Okay? And it's true, you do need to have a plan. Please do not have a plan. But what's key when you go through the door is that you will not know what that plan is. You will only know the kind of questions that you need to ask when you get through the door. So at Ometria, when I gave my 90-day presentation, I said, guess what, I didn't prepare anything. Here's a slide with some scaffolding on it, because that's what's going to happen. And rather beautifully at this moment, some builders outside were starting to build some scaffolding symbolically against a building across the road. But it's crucial. You need to know the questions to ask, not what you're going to do, because just because you did it once before doesn't mean you can do it again. And we come back to Stuart's comment about humility. It sounds great to say we made it to IPO. But the journey that we went on at Triptease after Viadio was incredibly different, and I had to learn a whole bunch of stuff all over again. I had to do things in a different way. The only thing I knew was the questions to ask, and I knew the mistakes I'd made previously. And then we made a whole bunch of other mistakes at Triptease, which I will avoid this time at Ometria. Make sure that you're asking the right questions. Second thing is to ignore your senior colleagues. When you get through the door at a company that is doing 2 to 10 million, the CTO is going to want to sit and talk to you, and the CPO is going to want to take you out for lunch, and one of the other founders and some investor board dude who you didn't talk to in the interview process is going to want to meet you. Ignore all of them. And the reason you ignore all of them is because the route to success is just in the first couple of weeks. So I'll give you an example. When we were at Triptease, my 14-year-old daughter at the time, she came to do an internship. And we wanted her to look at the onboarding process, and it was quite a complicated project. But she really, really loved it. And what she had to do was interview all of our new starters. And when she interviewed the new starters, she just asked them, what was the onboarding process like? She had a list of questions, she's only young. And what she discovered was two things. One is people at that middle management level, so not C-level, sort of sales managers, PR managers, marketing managers, they all had really, really important jobs to do in a very, very busy environment. They kept failing to meet her. They wouldn't go to meet her. So she said, I know I'm the least important person in the room, but I definitely feel the least important person in the room. And then what she discovered is that when she met with the younger people, like the junior sales people that had come through the door, the people that were a little bit lower level in the organization, guess what? They'd had the same experience as her. in their onboarding process, people who were doing very important jobs, not the C-level guys, but just below, they weren't turning up to do the onboarding sessions because they had important jobs to do. And that means that your very first experience through the door is a bad one. It's a little bit like turning up for a date. And in fact, in her presentation, it's exactly how she described it. It's a bit like turning up for a date. And I'm a bit too old for this, but maybe some of you have got children or you remember this. But apparently now you can go on a date with a boy to go to the pictures and Pizza Express. And even though he's in your school, you never talked to him before because you just communicated with him on Snapchat for the last month or something. And then you arrive at this place and he's such a disappointment because he was kind of cool on Snapchat, but he wasn't cool at all when you met him. Yeah. This could be a good guy. It could be a good guy, but that first impression is so important. And it's exactly the same when people come through the door. So when you come through the door at an organisation, the goal is not to go and meet your senior management team. It's not to try and understand the product. The goal is not to do any of those things. The goal is to spend time with your team. And I don't mean just a quick one-to-one, let's go for a coffee, and that's it. You're going to find out a lot by talking to the team because it's those people who you're going to be trying to give belief to so that you can start to build that business and scale it fast. Next thing to do is think about how you're going to build the team around you. And very interesting to hear what you said, Stuart, about hiring senior people fast, as you did at Slack, because it's exactly my belief as well. You might find that founders are a little bit worried about this, but you need to spend money on elite people as quickly as possible. And the reason for that is when you go through the door, even though you believe you're amazing, you got through the interview process and everyone's very excited because you're about to do some great stuff, but you will have weak points. You might not have mentioned them in the interview, but you will have weak points. And you will have things that you're either not as good at or you don't enjoy. And my theory now is that there are three things that we have to do in our work environment, same as in our home environment. So thing number one is stuff that you're good at, okay? So let's imagine that you're 70% good at a thing that you can do. It doesn't take a huge amount of obsessive learning and work and application to get from 70% to 80%, but you can do that, and then you go from really good to exceptional. But if you're 20% good at something, it takes a huge amount of effort to get to 30%. Guess what? Think back to your exams, 30% is still a massive fail. Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. You should be hiring people who are really good at the things you're not good at. In my case, it's around sales operations. So I know what I need to do in sales operations. I know I know how to manage a funnel, but I'm really bad at following up on all the exceptional detail that has to be done 6 months down the line. I don't want to follow that, I get a little bit bored. But I know that a great head of sales ops will add incredible value. So that means right now at Ometria, I'm hiring a head of sales ops and we want to spend a lot of money because I know we need to be ready for this, and otherwise I'm going to lose my time. By the way, I said there's three categories. The third category is called putting the bins out. And this is the stuff that you have to do at home, otherwise your wife goes crazy, and you need to put the bins out. This is not a talent, this is not a skill, it's also not something that you're bad at, it's just your job. And your wife will also have the same things that she has to do, which she doesn't really enjoy doing. And the hardest thing is to identify what I'm bad at and what is putting the bins out. It's very easy to put all the things you're bad at into the bins category. So figure out what is the stuff you must do. You're like, I find it kind of boring to do the commissions and the payroll, but it's kind of important. People get a little bit upset if you don't pay them properly. It needs to be done, okay? But the stuff that you're bad at, hire around you. I've got 1 minute, James tells me, so I'll just talk about the final thing. Final thing is to figure out really fast what is the short, what is the mid, and what is the long-term stuff that you're going to need to do. And the news is the hardest thing is the mid-term stuff. It's really complicated. When you look about the mid-term stuff, you're talking about complicated, sticky problems that you've been brought in to deal with, but also they're problems that are not going to get you very far. So you need to put that to one side for a moment. Short-term stuff is stuff like building self-belief in a team. I'll give you one quick example before I finish, James. So when I joined, Ivan said to me after about 4 weeks, Ivan is our CEO at Ometria, he said, I'm a little bit confused because I think all you've done is put a whiteboard up and everyone seems to be like tripling their activity. I don't get it. It's nothing to do with whiteboard. It's to do with people understanding what they need to do, giving people a sense of direction. One of the big problems we had at Ometria, same as in a lot of scaling businesses, is that the CEO is trying to do about 12 different jobs. And that means something is going to drop because no one is perfect. So the moment you have someone who's focusing all of their time on sales and on revenue growth, things are going to pick up. Short-term things give confidence to the company, but long-term stuff is vital. You need to think about this as scaling Everest. And That means with your sales team, we need to be thinking, how are we even going to get fit enough to get to base camp? And what things do we need at base camp? But I want to be prepared right now for what's happening in at least 18 months' time. So what I've already built in my first 6 weeks at Ometria is the plan that takes us 3 years down the line. That means we know exactly where we're going to be in 3 years. The whole team knows where we're going to be, and we know all the steps that we need to go on to get there. That means we have a success funnel. And it means if we were to miss even one small step, and for sure we'll miss some steps, that means that we can calibrate immediately. The challenge when you don't know what is your 3-year goal is that you're not quite sure whether you're going in a good direction. So short term, make sure that those steps are good. Long term, you must be able to give the team a plan. I think I've gone over my time, but thank you very much.